Have you ever noticed that the people who say they love you the most are often the first to disappear when you stop being useful to them? Think about that for a moment. Imagine waking up tomorrow and realizing that every ounce of your happiness has been handed over to people who never truly earned that power. Your mood depends on their messages. Your confidence depends on their approval. Your peace depends on whether they choose to stay. But what if the greatest mistake of your life isn't that people abandoned you? What if the greatest mistake is that somewhere along the way you abandoned yourself? Before this video ends, you may never look at your relationships, your ambitions, or even your own reflection the same way again, because the ancient Stoics discovered one truth that modern society desperately tries to hide. The only thing that truly belongs to you is yourself, and once you understand why, everything begins to change. Most people spend their entire lives chasing something that can never satisfy them. They chase admiration because they think respect will finally make them feel complete. They chase relationships believing another person's love will silence the emptiness they carry inside. They chase money, fame, status, and endless validation, hoping one more achievement will finally convince them that they matter. Yet despite all of this, the anxiety never disappears. The fear remains. The loneliness returns. Why? Because they built their identity on things that were never theirs to control in the first place. Imagine a man named Daniel. By every modern standard, he looked successful. He had a respected career, a beautiful home, loyal friends, and a relationship that everyone envied. Social media painted the perfect picture. Every smile looked genuine, every vacation looked magical, every celebration made people secretly wish they had his life. But behind closed doors, Daniel lived in constant fear. Every compliment became something he had to earn again tomorrow. Every promotion created pressure instead of peace. Every message from the woman he loved determined whether he would have a good day or a miserable one. Without realizing it, he had quietly surrendered the steering wheel of his own life. One afternoon, everything changed. His company announced unexpected layoffs. Years of loyalty disappeared in a 10-minute meeting. The woman he imagined spending his life with told him she needed space. Friends who once called every weekend suddenly became too busy to answer their phones. Within a single month, the identity he had spent decades building collapsed like a house made of sand. Daniel believed his life had ended. He sat alone in his apartment, staring at the silence, wondering how everything could disappear so quickly. He replayed every conversation, searching for mistakes. He blamed himself for things he couldn't control. He questioned whether he had ever been enough. Days turned into weeks, and the loneliness became unbearable. Then, something unexpected happened. While cleaning an old bookshelf, he found a worn copy of the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. It wasn't something he remembered buying. Maybe it had been a forgotten gift. Maybe fate had quietly placed it there years earlier, waiting for the exact moment he would finally be ready to understand it. He opened to a random page. The words were astonishingly simple. You have power over your mind, not outside events. At first he almost laughed. How could one sentence possibly matter when his entire world was falling apart? But the more he thought about it, the more uncomfortable it became. His suffering wasn't coming only from losing his job. It wasn't only about heartbreak. It wasn't only about loneliness. It came from believing those things defined who he was. For years, Daniel had unknowingly allowed other people to decide his value. Every compliment made him stronger. Every criticism shattered him. Every success inflated his confidence, while every failure destroyed it. He wasn't living from his own center. He was living through everyone else's opinions. How many people are doing exactly the same thing right now? Maybe more than they realize. Perhaps even you. From childhood, we are taught to seek approval before we seek understanding. We learn that good grades deserve praise. Good behavior earns acceptance. Success makes us valuable. Failure makes us invisible. slowly, our minds become trained to ask one dangerous question over and over again. What do they think about me? Rarely do we ask the only question that truly matters. What do I think about myself? This single shift separates people who spend their lives chasing happiness from those who quietly become unshakable. Marcus Aurelius ruled one of the greatest empires in history. Yet every morning he reminded himself that wealth, power, and admiration could disappear without warning. He wasn't preparing for disaster because he expected life to be cruel. He prepared because he understood something most people refuse to accept. Nothing outside your character truly belongs to you, not your reputation, not your possessions, not your relationships, not your achievements, not even your physical health. Every one of them can be taken by time, chance, illness, betrayal, or death. But your ability to choose your response remains yours until your final breath. That realization terrifies the average person because it removes every excuse. If your peace depends entirely on external circumstances, then you can always blame someone else when life hurts you. But if your peace depends on your own mind, then responsibility returns home. Most people spend decades trying to control people who were never theirs to control. They try to force loyalty, force attraction, force appreciation, force respect. The harder they try, the more exhausted they become. The Stoics looked at this struggle and simply asked why. Why spend your entire life guarding doors that belong to someone else while leaving your own mind completely unprotected? Think about the last time someone ignored your message. How much energy did you waste imagining reasons? Maybe they're upset. Maybe they found someone better. Maybe I said something wrong. Hours passed. Sometimes days. Your mind created stories without evidence, and every story stole another piece of your peace. Now imagine another person facing the exact same situation. They notice the unanswered message. They shrug. They continue reading, working, exercising, building their future. If the other person responds later, that's fine. If they never respond, that's also fine. Which person is actually free? The difference isn't intelligence, it isn't confidence, it isn't luck, it's ownership. One person gave ownership of their emotions away, the other kept it. Epictetus taught that suffering begins when we confuse what belongs to us with what never did. We cannot command another person's feelings. We cannot control whether someone respects us. We cannot stop people from lying, betraying, judging, or leaving. Trying to manage those things is like trying to command the weather. You can scream at the storm all day. The rain doesn't care, yet people spend years shouting at emotional storms, hoping reality will eventually obey their expectations. It never does. Real strength begins the moment you stop negotiating with reality. That doesn't mean becoming cold. It doesn't mean pushing everyone away. It doesn't mean pretending not to care. It means caring wisely, loving without becoming dependent, helping without expecting applause, working without attaching your identity to outcomes, giving without secretly demanding repayment. This is one of the hardest lessons a human being can ever learn, because everything around us encourages the opposite. Advertisements tell you happiness is one purchase away. Social media tells you worth is measured in followers. Entertainment tells you romance completes you. Society tells you your title determines your value. Every day, thousands of voices compete for ownership of your attention because they know something powerful. Whoever controls your attention slowly controls your life. That is why discipline isn't merely about waking up early or working harder. Discipline is deciding what deserves access to your mind. Seneca warned that the greatest slavery is becoming a prisoner of your own desires. Most people hear that and immediately think about money or luxury. But perhaps the deepest desire isn't wealth at all. Perhaps it's approval. Think about how many decisions people make simply to avoid criticism. They stay in careers that drain their soul because others expect success. They remain in relationships that destroy their confidence because they're afraid of being alone. They silence their dreams because someone once laughed at them years ago. Little by little, they trade authenticity for acceptance until they no longer recognize themselves. Then one day, they wake up wondering why they feel empty, despite doing everything they were told would make them happy. The answer is painfully simple. They built a life everyone admired, except the one person who had to live it: themselves. There is an old image that perfectly captures this truth. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack every single day. At first, the weight feels normal. Years pass, you adapt. Eventually, you forget you're even carrying it. Then someone removes the backpack for just 5 minutes. Suddenly, you realize how heavy your life had actually become. Seeking constant validation works exactly the same way. Most people never notice its weight because they've carried it since childhood. Only when they finally let it go do they discover what emotional freedom feels like. Daniel slowly began experimenting with this idea. Instead of checking his phone every few minutes, he went for long walks without it. Instead of obsessing over who had forgotten him, he started remembering himself. He exercised even when nobody noticed. He read even when nobody praised him. He worked on new skills without announcing them online. Days became weeks, weeks became months. Something strange began happening. The loneliness that once terrified him slowly transformed into peace. Silence stopped feeling like rejection. It became space. Failure stopped feeling like humiliation. It became education. Being alone stopped feeling like abandonment. It became freedom. But Daniel was about to discover an even deeper truth that most people never realize until it's far too late. And once he understood it, there was no going back. Daniel couldn't explain exactly when it happened, because real transformation rarely arrives with fireworks. It doesn't announce itself with a dramatic moment where everything suddenly makes sense. Instead, it grows quietly beneath the surface. One small decision at a time, one disciplined morning, one difficult conversation handled with calm instead of emotion, one night spent improving yourself instead of chasing someone who had already shown they weren't interested. Looking back, he realized that the strongest version of himself wasn't created by success. It was created by the moments when no one was watching. That is something modern culture almost never teaches. We celebrate visible victories, but ignore invisible discipline. We admire confidence without respecting the years of solitude that built it. We envy success without understanding the sacrifices hiding behind it. The Stoics understood that greatness is always created in private long before it is recognized in public. Think about a tree standing in the middle of a violent storm. People see the branches bending, they hear the wind roaring, they notice the leaves falling. But they rarely think about the roots buried deep beneath the ground. The roots survive because they were growing long before the storm arrived. Character works exactly the same way. When betrayal enters your life, when failure arrives without warning, when people misunderstand your intentions, when everything you planned falls apart, your response will never be determined in that moment. It will be determined by everything you practiced before that moment. This is why Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that hardship was not an interruption of life. Hardship was life itself. Every challenge became another opportunity to strengthen the only possession that could never be stolen from him: his character. Most people spend years asking why bad things happen to them. The Stoic asks a different question: who can I become because this happened? That single change in perspective transforms suffering into training. Imagine two people losing the same opportunity. The first spends months blaming the economy, bad luck, unfair people, and cruel circumstances. Every conversation becomes another reminder of everything they lost. Every memory becomes another excuse for standing still. Meanwhile, the second person feels the same disappointment, the same pain, the same uncertainty. But after grieving, they ask themselves one powerful question. What is this situation trying to teach me? Instead of wasting energy arguing with reality, they begin building themselves. One learns bitterness, the other learns resilience. Both experienced the same event. Only one became stronger. That is why your circumstances rarely define your future. Your interpretation does. Epictetus once explained that people are disturbed not by events, but by the opinions they form about those events. At first, this idea sounds almost impossible to accept because pain feels so real. Betrayal hurts, rejection hurts, failure hurts, loss hurts. The Stoics never denied that. They simply recognized another layer hidden beneath every painful experience, the story we tell ourselves afterward. Imagine someone walking past you without saying hello. One mind immediately thinks they must be angry. Another assumes they are distracted. Another barely notices and continues enjoying the day. The event never changed, only the interpretation did. Now expand that same principle across an entire lifetime. How many sleepless nights were created not by reality, but by imagination? How many friendships ended because assumptions replaced communication? How many dreams died because fear invented failure before effort even began? The human mind has an incredible ability to create prisons from thoughts that have never actually happened. This is why controlling your attention becomes one of the greatest forms of freedom. Attention is life. Whatever consistently receives your attention eventually shapes your identity. Feed your attention with comparison, and you become insecure. Feed it with outrage, and you become angry. Feed it with gossip, and you become distracted. Feed it with discipline, wisdom, and purpose, and your entire personality begins changing from the inside out. Most people underestimate the power of repeated thoughts. They assume identity is built through massive, life-changing moments. In reality, identity is usually created through ordinary moments, repeated thousands of times. Every morning you either strengthen self-respect or weaken it. Every promise you keep to yourself builds trust. Every promise you break slowly teaches your mind that your own words mean nothing. Think about how often people betray themselves. They promise they will wake up early. The alarm rings. They negotiate. Tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next year. Eventually, they stop believing themselves. Then they wonder why confidence disappeared. Confidence is not something you find. It is something you earn through evidence. Every disciplined action whispers the same message. I can trust myself. Every broken commitment whispers something else. I cannot rely on myself. This is why the only opinion that ultimately matters is your own. Not because everyone else's opinion is worthless, but because you are the one who must live with yourself every single day. If you disappoint strangers, nothing significant changes. If you disappoint yourself repeatedly, your entire inner world begins collapsing. Daniel discovered this in unexpected ways. At first he wanted revenge. He wanted the people who ignored him to regret leaving. He imagined becoming wildly successful just so they would finally realize what they had lost. For months, that fantasy motivated him. Then one afternoon, while lifting weights, he stopped in the middle of a workout and laughed. He realized something almost embarrassing. Even his self-improvement was still controlled by other people. He wasn't building himself because he loved growth. He was building himself hoping someone else would notice. The prison had simply changed shape. That realization changed everything. From that day forward, he stopped asking whether other people would appreciate his progress. He started asking whether today's actions made him respect himself more than yesterday. Some days the answer was yes, some days it was no. But for the first time in years, the judge he cared about most lived inside him instead of outside him. This is the quiet power the Stoics possessed. They were not emotionless. They were not detached from humanity. They simply refused to hand strangers the keys to their emotional stability. Imagine carrying a priceless treasure through a crowded city. Would you hand it to every person who smiled at you? Of course not. Then why do people hand over their peace so easily? One rude comment ruins an entire afternoon. One online insult destroys confidence. One rejection convinces someone they are unworthy of love. One mistake becomes an identity. Instead of saying, "I made a mistake," they begin saying, "I am a mistake." Instead of saying, "I failed," they begin saying, "I am a failure." Words become identities. Identities become destinies. This is why language matters. Pay attention to how you speak to yourself when nobody else can hear. Would you talk to someone you love the same way you talk to yourself? Many people wouldn't. They offer patience to strangers, but cruelty to themselves. They forgive everyone except the person staring back from the mirror. Seneca believed we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Think about that. Not always, more often, the majority of anxiety people carry today comes from futures that never arrive. The argument that never happens, the rejection that never comes, the disaster that exists only inside the mind. Hours of emotional energy disappear fighting invisible enemies. Meanwhile, life continues passing by. Imagine reaching 80 years old, only to discover that most of your fears never became real. How tragic would that be, to sacrifice decades of peace for possibilities that never existed? The Stoics wanted something radically different. They wanted presence, because only the present moment belongs to you. Yesterday is memory. Tomorrow is imagination. Today is reality. Protect it, use it, honor it. There is another lesson hidden inside loneliness that very few people ever understand. Most individuals fear being alone because solitude forces them to meet themselves without distraction. No notifications, no conversations, no entertainment, no applause, just silence. And inside that silence, uncomfortable truths begin appearing. Dreams they abandoned, habits they keep avoiding, potential they continue wasting. Many people rush back into noise because self-reflection feels too painful. The Stoic walks toward that silence instead, because within solitude lives clarity. Within clarity lives purpose. Within purpose lives freedom. Daniel eventually stopped seeing weekends alone as something to survive. He began looking forward to them. He cooked healthy meals, read difficult books, took long walks without headphones, sat quietly observing his own thoughts. At first his mind fought him. Old memories resurfaced, old regrets demanded attention, old fears tried convincing him that nothing had changed. Instead of escaping those thoughts, he observed them, like clouds passing across the sky, without chasing them, without becoming them. Weeks later, he noticed something remarkable. The thoughts still appeared, but they no longer controlled him. This is emotional mastery. Not eliminating emotion, learning that you are greater than every emotion passing through your mind. Just because anger knocks on your door does not mean you must invite it inside. Just because fear speaks does not mean it tells the truth. Just because loneliness visits does not mean you are incomplete. You are the observer, not the storm. And once you truly understand that distinction, another extraordinary realization begins to emerge. The world has been convincing you to search everywhere for strength, when the greatest source of strength has been waiting inside you all along. But there is one final lesson that ties everything together. It is the lesson that separates ordinary people from those who become impossible to break. And once Daniel understood it, every relationship, every setback, every success, and every challenge took on an entirely new meaning. The final lesson arrived on an ordinary morning. There was no dramatic breakthrough, no life-changing speech, no perfect sunrise, Daniel simply looked in the mirror before leaving his apartment and realized something that would have sounded impossible just a year earlier. He no longer needed anyone's permission to feel valuable. That single realization changed the way he walked into every room. He spoke without trying to impress. He listened without trying to prove himself. He worked without craving applause. He loved without becoming dependent. He lost without becoming broken. For the first time in his adult life, he understood what inner freedom actually felt like. Most people think confidence comes from winning. The Stoics believed confidence comes from knowing that even if you lose, you will still remain yourself. That is an entirely different kind of strength. Imagine two athletes preparing for the biggest competition of their lives. One tells himself that losing would mean he is a failure. The other tells himself that winning would be wonderful, but his character is not determined by the scoreboard. Who performs with greater calm? Who takes smarter risks? Who remains composed? Under pressure, the one whose identity is not attached to the outcome. This is why Stoicism is not about becoming indifferent to life. It is about refusing to let temporary events define your permanent identity. Life will continue testing you. Someone will misunderstand your intentions. Someone you trusted may disappoint you. People may overlook your efforts. You may fail after giving everything you had. Your plans may collapse. Your health may change. Your financial situation may rise and fall. None of these experiences are proof that you have failed as a human being. They are proof that you are alive. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that every morning he would encounter selfish people, dishonest people, arrogant people, and ungrateful people, yet he refused to allow their behavior to dictate his own. He understood a timeless truth. Your character should never become a reaction to someone else's lack of character. How often do people abandon their own values simply because someone else treated them unfairly? Someone lies to them, so they begin lying. Someone betrays them, so they stop trusting everyone. Someone insults them, so they become cruel. Without realizing it, they allow another person's weakness to rewrite their own identity. The Stoic refuses this exchange. Another person's darkness is never permission to abandon your own light. This principle becomes even more important in today's world. Every day, millions of people wake up and immediately surrender control of their emotions. A headline determines their mood. A notification decides their confidence. A stranger's opinion shapes their self-worth. Hours disappear scrolling through lives carefully edited to appear perfect. Comparison quietly poisons gratitude. Envy replaces inspiration. Noise replaces reflection. Then people wonder why they feel exhausted despite accomplishing very little. Attention is the most valuable currency you possess. Spend it carelessly and you become spiritually bankrupt. Spend it wisely and your entire life begins to transform. Ask yourself an honest question. What receives more attention in your life? Your own growth or other people's opinions? Your own purpose or other people's expectations? Your own peace or other people's approval? The answer to those questions quietly predicts the direction of your future. There is an old story about a sculptor who spent years carving a magnificent statue from a block of marble. Someone asked him how he created something so beautiful. He smiled and replied that the statue had always been inside the stone. He simply removed everything that did not belong. Your greatest task in life is remarkably similar. You do not need to become someone else. You need to remove everything that is not truly you, the fear that was taught, the insecurity borrowed from comparison, the need for approval, the endless apologies for existing. The belief that your value depends on productivity, status, appearance, or popularity. Remove those layers and what remains has been waiting there since the beginning. A person capable of extraordinary courage, a person worthy of respect, a person able to stand alone without feeling lonely, A person who understands that peace is created from within rather than purchased from the outside. Daniel eventually found another career, not because he desperately needed to prove anything, but because meaningful work became an expression of who he was rather than evidence of who he hoped to become. He entered new relationships without carrying the desperate fear of abandonment. Ironically, people respected him more once he stopped trying to earn respect. They trusted him because he trusted himself. They valued his presence because he no longer begged for attention. They noticed his calm because it could not be manipulated. This is one of life's greatest paradoxes. The moment you stop chasing validation, you become naturally attractive. Not because you learned a clever technique, but because authentic self-respect is impossible to fake. People sense it. Children sense it, leaders sense it, even those who dislike you recognize it. The strongest people in history were rarely those with the loudest voices. They were the ones whose inner world could not be shaken by the chaos around them. Think about the people you admire most. Is it their wealth or their integrity? Is it their popularity or their courage? Is it their possessions or their calm under pressure? Deep down, we all recognize that character outlives achievement. Money changes hands. Beauty fades, power shifts, fame disappears, character remains. That is why the Stoics invested more energy into mastering themselves than mastering the world, because they understood the world will always remain unpredictable. Your own mind can become your greatest ally. If there is one message to remember after this video, let it be this. You cannot control whether people love you. You cannot control whether they understand you. You cannot control whether they stay. You cannot control whether life unfolds according to your plans. But you can control the person you become while all of those things happen. And in the end, that is the only victory that time cannot erase. Years from now, nobody will remember every argument you won. Most people will forget your salary. Your social media posts will disappear. Your possessions will belong to someone else. But every decision you make today is quietly shaping the person you will spend the rest of your life becoming. Choose wisely. Protect your peace. Guard your attention. Honor your promises to yourself. Treat your character as your greatest achievement, because when everything else is stripped away, there is one companion who will remain with you until your final breath: yourself. So make that relationship the strongest one you will ever build. And if today's message challenged the way you think, don't let it end here. Write one sentence in the comments: I choose myself. Not as an act of selfishness, but as a promise that from this day forward you will stop abandoning your own peace in order to earn temporary approval. If this message gave you clarity, leave a like, because it helps more people discover timeless wisdom that can genuinely change lives. Subscribe for more Stoic lessons on discipline, resilience, emotional mastery, and inner freedom. Remember this whenever life becomes uncertain. The world can take almost everything you own, but it can never take the person you choose to become.